There's nothing like risking your own money to focus the mind. By contrast, one organization has all kinds of brilliant ideas, or what they say are brilliant ideas, and they keep testing them on people. And these experiments fail again and again, but they don't stop the experiment. They keep spending money on it. They're happy to do that because they're not spending their own money. It's yours that they're spending. And that organization, of course, is government. Economist Ed Stringham studies how markets solve problems better than government does. So, Ed, before we get to markets, I'll push back. Hillary Clinton says government learns from mistakes and improves things.
Well, in the private sector, there's an important thing called profits and losses. If you do a good job, you make profits. If you do a bad job, you make losses. Government lacks profits and losses. So people who can't balance a basic budget, they overspend. Rather than getting penalized for that, they go back to taxpayers and say, please, you need to give me more money. And it just persists
and we give it to them.
On and on.
We can't do it. We need a higher budget, and Congress then says, okay, here it is.
They should be fired if they can't balance a basic budget. Instead, they get rewarded. Oftentimes, bureaucrats get to expand by asking for more money.
All right, well, give examples. You say the housing bubble.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's lots of examples where government regulators fail. 10 years ago, they were enacting a bunch of regulations. They were saying, oh, we know what we're doing. We're going to prevent any downturn in the future. For example, Sarbanes-Oxley Act was very onerous on business.
That came after the Enron failure.
Right.
They were going to fix all these failures with Sarbanes-Oxley.
Right, and it didn't do anything to prevent the next economic downturn. Right now, they're doing...
It added thousands of pieces of paper, cost a ton, gave lawyers work.
And it didn't have the positive effects they were promising. And now what do? They said, well, we need more regulation. So we've got now the Dodd-Frank Act, which is 30 times longer than War and Peace. It's extremely onerous, and I'm quite sure it's going to do nothing to prevent the next economic downturn.
And it didn't end too big to fail. Another example is the war on poverty. It improved things, lifted some people out of poverty, but then progress stopped.
Housing projects, which had disincentives for working, they were magnets for crime, terrible places to live. And what happens? All these years later, they still exist in most cases.
Some are just being blown up, and then they build new versions of them.
Yeah, and now does the Housing and Urban Development, do they get put out of business? No, they're still spending money year after year after year.
Public school?
Public schools, same thing. We've got tons of examples of failed policies. They're harming the kids. They're not helping education. And what do we say? Oh, this is a failed public school. Let's put them out of business. No, this is a failed public school. We need to throw more money at the problem.
And nobody is fired in government. There's civil service protection, if not union rules, so almost nobody is ever fired.
Government officials, you've got tremendous job security. People can be doing the most terrible job, and it's almost impossible in certain areas to even let these people go.
And I've noticed over my reporting career, I've talked to a lot of people who say, oh, it was horrible being fired. I hated that. But, you know, I'm so glad it happened. I feel much more useful now. I found something new where I'm doing better. That's the creative destruction that makes capitalism work, and it doesn't work and doesn't get to do its wonderful stuff in government.
Right, so markets are constantly awarding innovation, encouraging people to try new things, learn from past mistakes. Government, it's like, well, we've always done it this way, we're always going to do it this way, or let's try this other thing. Well, maybe it's not working out so well, and they'll just continue doing it basically forever.
And you've written a book about this, just out, called Private Governance. Give an example of how that works.
Well, I like to highlight some private people who've learned from failure. You mentioned PayPal earlier in the segment. We've got a great example of them getting defrauded by all types of hackers around the world. And rather than them sitting around saying, well, we don't know what to do, they had to learn from these problems. And so very quickly they implemented a fraud detection, fraud elimination system. So right now they've got a very good way of reducing online fraud losses to very close to zero.
They program computers to search for certain patterns?
Yes, if there's a bunch of small transactions all of a sudden happening in the middle of the night, it's like this this computer is looking at things at all times and saying, you know what, I don't think that's right. And it would send up all these red flags, alert the business. In certain cases, they would freeze the accounts or not allow those transactions.
And other entrepreneurs copy it. I'm sure Visa and MasterCard have similar systems.
Yeah, they've had a great positive influence on the industry, and CyberSource was another company that implemented a lot of these things, which has since got bought by Visa. So a lot of these things that we traditionally look to the government to solve are solved privately because people have money at stake.
The private sector adapts. Look at private insurance companies. When people file claims, insurers don't want to pay for fraud, so private insurers often hire investigators. This one came on my show to explain how his detectives videotape people they suspect filed phony claims for disability.
Our claimant's in the water, swimming, talking, conversing, and then decides to climb up to the top of this ledge, as you can see here, and jumps off with no signs of disability whatsoever.
Social Security, Medicare, government rarely runs tests like that.
Oh, there's so many examples of fraudulent claims with fraudulent disabilities, and these things have skyrocketed over the past few years, and even the government knows that there's tons of fraud going on.
The GAO admits it.
Yeah, $1 billion in a recent report we've just lost this to fraudulent claims, but they don't have the same profit and loss incentives because they don't really care. They're going to charge it off to us taxpayers.